So friends, I think the big Donald Trump passport mystery has been solved. Let's talk about that, because justice matters. Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. So we heard an awful lot yesterday about Donald Trump's passports. The first thing we heard was from Donald Trump himself when he posted a statement in his typical breathless, hysterical, nonsensical ramblings. And he told us all that the FBI stole his 3 passports during the execution of the search warrant at Mar-a-Lago. And then in fairly short order, we got what seemed to be an update from CBS's Norah O'Donnell, who tweeted, according to a DOJ official, the FBI is not in possession of the former president's passports. And after the Norah O'Donnell tweet, we got some additional reporting later in the evening. This from NBC News: Trump's passports returned after Mar-a-Lago search, DOJ official says. Well, now that the reporting dust seems to have settled, let's talk about how and why something like a passport might be seized during the execution of a search warrant and then might be returned. Because in my experience, and I was involved in the execution and the approval and the returns of lots and lots of search warrants, I don't think this was a mistake. I don't think this was nefarious conduct by the FBI. I don't think there was anything inappropriate with returning the passports after they had been taken. I actually believe the seizure of the passports was part of what the judge who signed the search warrant authorized. And here's why. Okay, friends, so for this discussion, I think we're going to have to go to Team Justice Law School. And you'll have to forgive me, I didn't really prepare a lecture plan for today, so let's just sort of roll with it. And we're going to talk about search warrants and the legal concept of constructive possession. So we're going to start with a hypothetical. It's going to be a meth lab, someplace that they manufacture methamphetamine, illegal drugs. And then we're going to move on to Mar-a-Lago. Let's start with the meth lab. If we get a search warrant to go in and hit or search a meth lab, that search warrant will do a couple of things. It will authorize a search of a particular place. It will authorize things to be seized, because the Fourth Amendment requires that you specifically and with particularity describe the place to be searched and the items to be seized. But then there will be another category of stuff that we're generally authorized to take during the course of the search warrant. That stuff is the kind of stuff that will show who had a possessory interest over the items in that meth lab, who may have had an ownership interest. Why is that important? Well, we may hit the meth lab executing the search warrant and it's empty, nobody's there. But there is this evidence of crime all over because people had been manufacturing illegal narcotics there. So what do we have to prove? We have to prove whose meth lab it is. So search warrants will also authorize us to take any evidence, documents, photographs, mail matter that tends to show who has a possessory interest in the area to be searched. So we are almost always taking what we refer to as mail matter, something that has a name and an address and says, please deliver to Joe Smith at the meth lab, 123 Main Street, whatever the address is. We will take that mail matter as evidence. We might find somebody who's been paying utility bills, a record of payment of an electric bill at the meth lab. We might find an old driver's license. We might find some important old legal documents with somebody's name. We might find pictures of people hanging out in the meth lab. We seize all of that. Those things might not be evidence of crime, but they are evidence that shows who has a possessory interest over the items of evidence that we seize because they are evidence of crime. Kind of like passports. So before we move down to Mar-a-Lago and apply these same principles to the search that was conducted by the FBI at Mar-a-Lago, let me talk about constructive possession. So there are two kinds of possession in the law. There's actual possession and there's constructive possession. Actual possession is, here's one of my legal pads. I really do everything on legal pads and dry erase whiteboards. I am actually possessing this legal pad because it's in my hands. But you know what? Once I put it down, I'm not actually possessing it anymore, but I'm constructively possessing it because it's in a place where I have a possessory interest, maybe even an ownership interest. So even though it's not in my hands, the law says I'm constructively possessing it, and that could be an important piece of evidence if there was if the legal pad was evidence of crime. So my next door neighbor in the next office over couldn't come in and grab that white pad not lawfully because he doesn't have the lawful authority, the possessory interest over my office. So that becomes important when we talk about boxes of stuff that are seized from a location where many people might have had access to, because we have to prove who had constructive possession of the stuff in that box, who had a possessory interest over that box. Let's go down to Mar-a-Lago. We heard the reporting, as we mentioned earlier in this video, that first Trump said they stole my passports from Mar-a-Lago. Then there was some reporting that no, DOJ says they don't have your passports. And then when the reporting dust settles, we learned that the FBI did in fact take possession of, seize his passports, and then return them a couple of days later. People will say, well, they must have taken them by mistake, or they must have taken them nefariously. If they're giving them back, that must be an admission that they shouldn't have taken them in the first place. Not so. First of all, those passports in and of themselves might not be evidence of crime, but they are evidence of a possessory interest in the area from which the passports were taken. So let's assume there was a box full of classified documents, and tucked into that box were Donald Trump's passports. What does that tell us? That's a piece of evidence that shows Donald Trump had a possessory interest in that box, may have even had constructive possession of that box, even though it wasn't recovered from his hands. So passports, legal documents, mail matter, utility bills, etc., becomes important circumstantial evidence to help prove who was in possession, actual possession or constructive possession, over the evidence of crime that we seize during the execution of a search warrant. Now, on the lighter side, we could make a game show out of this, right? Whole bunch of boxes were seized from Mar-a-Lago. So we could play whose box is it? Let's assume we find a box at Mar-a-Lago while the FBI is executing a search warrant, has a whole bunch of classified top secret information that was stolen from the White House and brought down to Florida. And together with all of that classified and top secret information, we found a bunch of swastika bumper stickers and a can of black spray-on hair. Whose box might that be? Maybe it's Stephen Miller's. We find another box with a whole bunch of classified top secret information, and in that box we find a whole bunch of crumpled up Big Mac wrappers and some empty cans of Diet Coke and a picture of Ivanka Trump in a frame with a heart around it. Whose box might that be? Donald Trump's. I'll be here all week, friends. Please treat your wait staff generously. All right, that's a lighter side, but hopefully that helps prove the point that it's not just the evidence of crime that gets seized. It's other items that might inform the authorities as to who has a possessory interest over those items of evidence of crime. We don't know for a fact that's why the FBI seized and then returned these passports, but it all sort of makes sense when I think about the way we ordinarily execute search warrants. And think about this. Once they seize the passports, they take them back to the FBI lab at Quantico, perhaps they process them, they photograph them, they document them. Because the passports in and of themselves are not evidence of crime, it would be entirely appropriate to return the passport back to Donald Trump because they already have the evidence that that passport was found in a particular place that led to the inference that Donald Trump possessed the stuff, the classified documents that were commingled with or near where those passports were found. Friends, as always, please stay safe, please stay tuned, and I look forward to talking with you all again tomorrow.